Did you know that every 90 seconds a child dies from a water-related disease? That's not just a statistic. It's a silent crisis happening while many of us turn on our taps without a second thought. Hello, listeners, and welcome to H2O and Beyond. I'm Alex Hahn, and each week we dive into the science, systems, and stories behind the water we use every day. Whether it's pollution, policy, or innovation, we break it all down so anyone can understand what's at stake. In this episode, we'll explore why something as basic as clean water remains one of the biggest public health challenges of our time. Let's dive in. For many of us, clean water is as easy as turning a handle. But for over 2.2 billion people, about 1 in 4 globally, safe drinking water remains out of reach. That's according to a 2023 UN report. And every year, more than 3.5 million people die from water-related diseases. And tragically, a large portion of these deaths are preventable. Children under the age of 5 are hit the hardest. Their immune systems are still developing, making them more vulnerable to infections caused by unsafe water. These diseases are often caused by diarrhea from contaminated water, a lack of access to hand washing and sanitation, and finally, exposure to untreated waste or toxic chemicals. You might think this is an issue in just developing countries, but let me tell you, it's not. In the US, we've seen 2 major crises in the last decade. Probably the most famous one that you've heard of was the water crisis in Flint, Michigan. So, what happened was, in 2014, the city switched its water source from Lake Huron to the Flint River in order to save money. The water from the Flint River was not properly treated and it began to corrode aging pipes, leaching lead and other contaminants into the drinking water. Residents complained for months about the color, smell, and taste, but officials denied anything was wrong. By the time action was taken, it was already too late. Thousands of people, especially children, had been exposed to dangerous levels of lead. Furthermore, in 2022, Jackson, Mississippi had its own share of water problems. Heavy rains flooded the Pearl River and overwhelmed Jackson's already fragile water system, and treatment plants failed. This left over 150,000 residents without safe water for weeks. This meant that they were unable to drink, bathe, or even flush toilets. The reasons for each specific failure vary, but we can see some common themes among them. In many high-income countries, their infrastructure is getting old and is starting to deteriorate. Climate change in many areas of the world is contributing to system stress because floods are becoming more common. And finally, underinvestment in water systems leads to poor infrastructure, making it more prone to failure. Water is essential, but access to clean water isn't guaranteed, not even in wealthy nations. So let's break down what we mean by clean, because looking clear isn't enough. We often assume water is clean if it doesn't smell bad or look murky. But in reality, true water safety goes much deeper. According to the WHO and the UN, clean water must meet a few key criteria. First, it must be free from harmful microorganisms like E. coli or cholera. These cause serious illnesses, especially in children. Second, it must be free from toxic chemicals like lead, arsenic, nitrates, and PFAS, all of which can cause long-term health problems. And finally, it must be treated, tested, and delivered in a safe and reliable way, from the source to your tap. Let's talk about some of the most concerning contaminants. First up is lead. This is a heavy metal that often comes from old pipes and plumbing. It's especially dangerous for kids because it can cause permanent brain damage and developmental delays, and there's no safe level of lead exposure. For other heavy metals and contaminants, the EPA sets a limit for the maximum concentration allowed in your water. Arsenic, for example, has an upper limit of 10 micrograms per liter, or 10 parts per billion. The EPA has set the maximum contaminant level for lead in drinking water at 0, showing just how toxic it is. As far back as the Roman Empire, people were using lead to make pipes due to its malleability and cheap price. If the water is just slightly acidic, though, it corrodes these pipes and causes the lead to leach into the water supply. Next up is PFAS, or forever chemicals. The non-abbreviated name is polyfluoroalkyl substances. Nowadays, they're used in things like non-stick cookware, waterproof clothing, and firefighting foam. They don't break down in the environment, though, which means they accumulate in our water sources and in our bodies. PFAS exposure has been linked to cancer, immune problems, and hormone disruption. A U.S. Geological Survey in 2023 found PFAS in about 45% of tap water samples nationwide. If you've heard of Teflon, you've heard of PFAS. DuPont, one of the key manufacturers, was involved in multiple lawsuits over contamination in the West Virginia area. I believe this was sometime in the early 2000s. DuPont knew about the negative effects of PFAS on the human body, but continued to dump it into the environment, where it eventually ended up in people's drinking water. If you're curious to learn more, they made a movie about it. It's called Dark Waters, and I highly recommend you check it out. I'm also planning on making an episode all about PFAS later on, so keep an eye out for that as well. Finally, we have microplastics. These are tiny plastic particles smaller than 5 millimeters in size. They're now being found everywhere, in bottled water, tap water, rain, and even in the most extreme places on Earth, like Mount Everest and the Mariana Trench. Believe it or not, we actually ingest a credit card's weight in microplastics per week. Scientists are still studying their long-term health effects, but they've been linked to inflammation, impaired immune function, and even as hormone disruptors. They're basically in everyone's bloodstream at this point, showing just how widespread they are. And here's the problem. Many existing treatment plants, especially older ones, weren't built to filter out these types of contaminants. They were designed for bacteria and dirt, not modern contaminants like PFAS. So even if your water meets legal standards, it doesn't always mean it's as clean or as safe as it should be. So let's flip the question. What does go on at a wastewater treatment plant? Water that we flush, drain, or pour down the sink becomes wastewater, and managing it properly is crucial to keeping our drinking water clean. Wastewater treatment systems are designed to do four main things: remove solids like food scraps, dirt, or anything flushed that shouldn't be, kill harmful pathogens, break down organic waste using microbes in large treatment tanks, and finally, to return safe, treated water back into the environment. At this point, it's probably crucial to make this distinction. In most areas, the wastewater treatment plant is separate from the drinking water plant. Usually, wastewater treatment plants discharge their treated water back into nature in areas like lakes or rivers. The drinking water plants then take that water and further purify it to be safe for human consumption. Now that we have that out of the way, here's the problem. Globally, over 80% of wastewater isn't treated at all, and this is mostly in developing countries and rural areas. This means that raw sewage ends up in rivers, lakes, and coastal areas, threatening human health, wildlife, and drinking water sources. Even in wealthy countries like the US, many wastewater systems are overwhelmed or outdated. The EPA estimates that over $270 billion is needed to just maintain and upgrade existing wastewater infrastructure. Climate change is making things worse, increasing the risk of system overflows during heavy rain and flooding, pushing many treatment plants beyond their capacity. The result? A huge global challenge that threatens health, ecosystems, and water security. However, there are solutions, and they're already working in some places. Across the globe, engineers, scientists, and communities are rethinking how we manage water, and they're finding smarter, more sustainable ways to protect it. Let's walk through a few areas where innovation is bringing real hope. Wastewater treatment plants are now being adapted to better handle the challenges posed by climate change. So, for context, in older cities like Paris, they use what's called a combined sewer system. This is when stormwater and wastewater flow through the same pipes. However, this system has major cons. During times of heavy rain, these pipes can overflow and cause raw sewage to flow out of the rivers. This is why last year in the Paris Olympics, the officials were so concerned about the water quality in the Seine River. Raw sewage would flow straight in and release harmful bacteria like E. coli. So what Paris did, and many other cities are following, is they built overflow basins. These are large above ground or underground holding areas that temporarily store excess water during heavy rainstorms. The idea is that this provides sort of a buffer so that the pipes don't overflow and raw sewage doesn't flow back into the streets. After the storm has passed and the system can handle it again, the stored water is gradually released to the treatment plants. Next up is green infrastructure, where cities are utilizing nature to help solve some of these problems. Cities like Portland, Philadelphia, and New York have invested in permeable pavements that reduce runoff and allow rainwater to filter into the ground below, where it can be absorbed or slowly drained away through natural processes. This reduces the risk of flooding that overwhelms the wastewater treatment plants. These tools can make a real impact, but they need public investment, strong policy, and community support. Want to take this further? Look up your local water quality report. It's called a consumer confidence report, and your utility is required to make it available. If you live in an older home or use well water, consider testing your tap. In the next episode, I'll be interviewing the Stickney Water Reclamation Plant in Chicago, one of the largest wastewater treatment plants in the world. They'll tell us all about their plant and how wastewater treatment works. If you found this episode helpful, share it with your coworkers and friends. Feel free to drop some episode suggestions and feedback in the Google form linked in the description as well. I'm Alex. Thanks for listening to H2O and Beyond. Stay curious and stay hydrated.